Welcome to Live Daf, your online Daf Yomi Shir.
Shalom Aleichem and welcome back to today's Daf Yomi, which is Eruvin Daf Ches. We're on Ches Amud Aleph, in the middle of the first wide line, which is actually 13 lines from the top. We'll move discussing the halacha of a mavi, which is ending at a rechava. So the mavi is beginning at Rosh Hashanah, extending up until an area called the rechava, which is an enclosed area. Now this rechava actually is also open to Rosh Hashanah on the other side. The Gemara tells us this mavi is regarded like a mavi sasam, like an enclosed mavi. We don't consider this mavi like an alleyway which is stretching from one Rosh Hashanah to the other Rosh Hashanah, because although it's connected to a rechava, which in itself is open to Rosh Hashanah, but the mavi is a separate entity, and therefore the mavi itself is not regarded as though it's open and exposed on both ends to Rosh Hashanah. The Gemara tells us that's only provided the mavi is entering the rechava at midpoint, meaning the rechava, which is actually wider than the mavi, is overlapping the mavi on both sides, in which case it doesn't appear like the mavi is blending into the rechava. But if the mavi is reaching into the side of the rechava, in this case it's different, because it appears as though the wall of the rechava is actually an extension of the wall of the mavi. So it appears like the mavi is leading straight into the rechava. It's blending into it. It's considered like one long alleyway. And in that case, you would consider the mavi like a mavi mefulish, because it appears as though it's heading into the rechava and heading out to Rosh Hashanah. So this halacha that it's a mavi sasam is only when it's in the middle of the rechava. Now Rav Mishashi added for us that this is only when the rechava belongs to a rabbin. It's a publicly owned rechava. There's no concern about perhaps the configuration of the rechava changing in the future. But if it's a rechava de yachid, if it's a privately owned rechava, we're concerned that although at the present moment the mavi seems to be entering the midpoint of the rechava, and therefore it's considered a separate entity, it's not blending, mixing together with the rechava, but perhaps in the future he's going to decide to redevelop the rechava and build some houses. He might build a wall right at the entry point where the mavi enters the rechava. So there will be a wall there which will seem to be an extension of that mavi, and it's going to appear like the mavi is simply meshing into the rechava, and therefore will have a din like min hatzad. We'll consider both of them like one large extended usage area. Therefore, says Rav Mishashi, if it's a rechava de yachid, we don't treat this mavi as a mavi sasam. We're concerned perhaps things will change in the future. Therefore, we don't allow carrying within it without the additional tikkun of a mavi mefulish. Says the Gemara, in the middle of the first wide line, which is 13 lines from the top, how do we know? How do you know that one is meant to suspect and be concerned perhaps things will change in the future? Just follow the present moment. If right now it's fine, who says you're meant to be concerned just because it belongs to a yachid? Things might change. Umanot teimra, the shanilan, that we should differentiate between rechava de rabbim, rechava de yachid. Says the Gemara, you know why? The Amar Ravin Barav Ada, we find a support to this concept from the following halacha. The Amar Ravin Barav Ada, Amar Rav Yitzchak, Maaseh b'mavi echad. There was an incident with a certain mavi. So this mavi began at Rosh Hashanah, of course, and had a lech yokera. Now the other three sides of the mavi were actually enclosed as follows. One side had a proper mechitza. The other side had a yam, a body of water, where there was a seawall, which is considered to be a mechitza. And then the other side was actually an ashpa, a heap of trash, which was 10 tefachim high and constituted a mechitza. So again, Maaseh mavi echad shetzide echad kol yam. One side of the mavi ended at the yam, which formed a mechitza because if it's a riverbed or body of water, so the ridge of the water, it sloped downward in a manner which is considered to be a halachic mechitza. The ashpa, one side of the mavi, ended at the ashpa, which is also Rosh Hashanah. Can one carry this mavi? Why not? It's fully surrounded. Uba Maaseh of Rebbe. So the Maaseh, they came to ask Rebbe, could one carry this mavi, which is surrounded by mechitzas? He was very hesitant to rule on the matter. He didn't issue a heter or isser. He left it in limbo. Why? He didn't want to say that it's asad carrying the mavi. Don't carry mechitzas, because presently there are mechitzas there. There's an ashba, there's a yam. Why not? Heter lo yama, however, he didn't want to issue an heter. Why? Chayshinan. We're concerned perhaps things will change in the future. Shemetinatal ashba, perhaps the ashba will be removed. But yala yam sirtain, and the yam will kick up. Sirtain, Rashi describes as being choil avonim, earth and sand and pebbles. So that's the derech, that's the manner of the yam to kick up this refuse, and perhaps it's going to negate, it's going to level off that mechitza. So due to these concerns, he didn't want to issue a heter, because although in the present moment the mechitzas were present, perhaps they'll disappear in the future. Says the Gemara, how could he be concerned that an ashba will be removed? We seem to have a Mishnah that tells us otherwise. We're concerned that the ashba will be removed. But haven't we learned? Ashba, if you have a heap of garbage in Rishus Ram, which is 10 tfachim high, which is considered Rishus HaYachid. If there's a window on top of it, meaning near that pile, one can throw out an object, he can throw out his garbage onto this pile, which is in Rishus Ram, because this pile of garbage is considered Rishus HaYachid. So we're not concerned with him using this ashba. Perhaps the ashba will be removed, meaning the pile will get shorter, less than 10 tfachim, and it'll be no longer considered Rishus HaYachid. Not concerned about that. So we have a clear Mishnah that negates that concern. So why was Rebbe concerned by the ashba, which bordered this mavi? So you must make that distinction. It depends who owns the ashba. Alma, apparently, there's a difference. Shani ben ashba de rabim, la ashba de yachid. There's a difference if it's a publicly owned ashba, as in the Mishnah there, where there's no concern, they're going to remove the refuse, the garbage, as opposed to the mavi, which apparently was an ashba de yachid, a privately owned heap of trash, where there's a concern perhaps he'll decide to redevelop the area, move out the ashba, in which case the mechitza will no longer exist. So we see that chiluk between Rabbim and Yachid. Hachanami here as well when it comes to the Rechava. Shoni ben Rechava de Rabbim, Rechava de Yachid. There's a difference between Rechava de Rabbim, where we can assume that things will just stay at its status quo, as opposed to a privately owned Rechava, where there's a concern perhaps he's going to decide to redevelop and reconfigure that Rechava and change the dimensions, which will be problematic to our Mavi. So that's the Raya to Rav Misharshia. Says the Gemara, getting back to that Mavi, which Rebbe was pretty hesitant to issue a clear-cut directive. What about the other Rabbanan that were around in that generation? What did they hold regarding that Mavi? Rabbanan Mai. Amar Rav Yosef Rav Dimi, Tana we learned, in the Brayso of a Chum Eishim, they actually prohibited carrying this Mavi. They were very concerned about that eventuality, and they actually said you cannot carry the Mavi. Indeed, we follow, the halacha follows their shita. There's another version of events. Rav Yosef Rav Dimi, Tana, we learned to the Brayso of a Chum Matir. They were matir to carry that Mavi. They weren't concerned with that possibility of the mechitzas being removed. Rav Nachman, ein halacha, we don't follow the Chacham shita. We are concerned about the removal of those mechitzas. Continues the Gemara with another story. Mareimar. So in the town of Surah, there were the muvais, these alleyways, which began at Rishus Rabim, with a lechi v'kor, and they extended up until the body of water, which posed a mechitza. Merema was concerned that perhaps that mechitza will eventually disintegrate. As we said earlier, the yam will change things. Therefore, he was pasikla l'surah b'uzli. So he partitioned these mavois in Surah Bu'uzli with nets. He created a true partition, did not want to rely on the yam. Amar, he said, Chayshinan Shamiyala Yam Sirtain, we're concerned the yam will kick up the refuse and the dirt, and this will negate, will level off that mechitza, and therefore he created his own mechitza. Says the Gemara, Hu Mavoi Akum Dahava Besura. So in the town of Surah, there was also this Mavoi Akum, this bent Mavoi. We learned this earlier, that there was Machlekes Rav and Shmuel. How do we regard a Mavi Akam? So this is a Mavi which begins at Rishus Rabim, takes a sharp bend, and ends in Rishus Rabim. So technically, it's a walkthrough from one Rishus Rabim to the other. But since it's in a direct route, it's different than your typical Mavi Mefulish. Rav says, nevertheless, it is regarded as you walk through, it's a mavi mefulush. And therefore one needs to place a tzuras HaPesach, a physical formation of a doorway, at that bend. So it's an L-shaped mavi. At the bend, he needs to place a tzuras HaPesach to enclose each leg of this mavi, to make it a mavi sasam. And this will allow placing lechi over here, and the lechi over here at the entranceway to Rishis Rabbim. Shmuel says no, it's a mavi sasam. Since it's an indirect route, we regard this as a mavi sasam, this as a mavi sasam. There's no need to add more than your standard lechi v'kuri at the entrance point to Rishis Rabbim. So there was a story about a mavi akam that was in Surah. So what did they do? Karach budya. They rolled up a mat. Oisivu be ba'akmu mise. They placed it at the bend, at the crack in the L. Amar Rav Chizda, what did they do? Had like a Rav, like a Shmuel. They didn't follow neither Rav Shita nor Shmuel Shita. Explains the Gemara. The Rav, the Amar Torah Fullash. Rav, who maintains that a mavi akam has a din like an open and exposed mavi. Tzuras HaPesach boy. That requires a Tzuras HaPesach. So what good did they do by adding this rolled up mat at the bent portion of the mavi? That doesn't close things off. L'shmuel, the Amar Torah Sasam. Now, according to Shmuel, who maintains that it's a mavi sasam, and therefore only your standard lechi or kur is required. Now, Rashi explains that what happened was, so this L-shaped mavi, there were people living on this part of the mavi, and there was bnei mavi over here. Now, only the people living on one leg of that L-shaped mavi, wanted to carry in their mavi. So they placed a lechi at the entranceway to Rishis Rabbim in order to allow carrying within their portion of the mavi. The other people on the other side of that bent mavi weren't really concerned about carrying. They weren't looking to allow carrying in their portion of the mavi, so they didn't place a lechi where they enter from Rishis Rabbim. So the fellows living on this side of the mavi, who had placed a lechi at the entrance point of their portion of the mavi, they needed to place a lechi right at the bend, at the meeting point of one portion of the mavi with the other portion of the mavi, in order to separate themselves from the other portion of the mavi, meaning it's like a substitute for the lechi that's meant to be really at the other entrance point to Rishis Rabbim. So therefore they placed a lechi right at the bend of the mavi. They placed one at their entrance point and at the bend as well. Says the Gemara, if they were trying to do that, because this is in accordance with Shmuel, who considers this mavi as a mavi sasam, and all it needs is a lechi at the entrance point to Rishis Rabbim. L'shmuel da'amar Torah sasam, hani mi lechi ma'alya. It's only if you use a proper lechi. Aval hai, but this rolled up mat, kiva the navshev beizika v'shadilei. Since it's this light, flimsy thing which the wind can simply blow it away, loy klomu, it's not worth anything. So what do they accomplish? Vina, it's beisichsa. Indeed, if they fixed a peg, a nail into this mat, v'chibrei, and affixed it to the ground, chibrei, that's a fix, then it will be fine. But just to put this rolled mat somewhere in the middle of your mavi really doesn't provide any benefit. So in summary, we learned that yes, indeed, there is a chashash in some situations that things will change. For instance, a rechava de yachid, perhaps he'll build it up and change the configuration. This will cause the mavi, which is entering that rechava, to be coming into the side of the rechava and to appear as one continuous entity with the rechava. We learned that in ashpa de yachid, there is a concern that perhaps it's going to be removed. The same thing regarding a yam. Perhaps the yam will be malas sirtain, will bring up sand and pebbles and negate the mechitzas. Continues the Gemara. Gufa, so we learned earlier regarding the mavi which is entering the chatzar. Amar Rav Yirmeh ba'ab amarav. Mavi shenifratz b'maloy lechatzar. If you have a mavi which is beginning at Rishis Rabbim, continue on to a chatzar, and it's breached, completely open to that chatzar, even if it's a chatzar connected, and the chatzar itself has also been breached. There was a hole that formed in the wall, which is separating the chatzar from Rishis Rabbim. So that breach was facing opposite the mavi. Chatzar muteres or mavi aser. So we learned earlier that the chatzar is mutter, you can carry in the chatzar. There's no need to make an erev chatzeris with the mavi, because the chatzar is certainly considered to be a separate entity, due to the fact that the chatzar is larger than the mavi, envelops the mavi, it overlaps the mavi. So when you're standing on the chatzar side of things, the mavi, which is entering the chutzner, appears merely like an entranceway, like a Pesach, because on both sides there are walls. So the chutzner doesn't need to make an eruv with the residence of the mavi in order to allow carrying within the chutzner. But mavi asur, the mavi is asur betilta, because you can't carry the mavi without an eruv with the bnei chutzner. Why is that? Because the mavi was nifratz l'chutzner. It's completely exposed and open to the chutzner. There's no tzuras Pesach. There's nothing separating the mavi from the chutzner. Meaning, this breach between the mavi and the chutzner has two applications. It serves two purposes. As far as the chutzner is concerned, it's regarded like a Pesach, like a doorway, like an entranceway, due to the fact that on the chutzner's side of things, from his perspective, it looks like a doorway, because there are walls on either side of that entrance point. As opposed to the mavi, for him this is merely a pirza. Meaning, when you have a hole in a wall, it can be classified in two ways. It can be called a Pesach, a doorway, an entranceway. A wall is meant to have an entranceway. It doesn't negate the wall, provided that it's configured properly. It's no larger than 10 amas. Or as we learned earlier, it can't be breached into the corner. It has to have a din of a Pesach. So regarding the chutzner, this entranceway is a Pesach. As opposed to the mavi side of things, it's called a pirza. Pirza means a breach in a wall. That negates the status of the wall, the mechitza. Because a wall is meant to contain. If it's broken open, it's not serving the function of a mechitza. It's not functioning, it's not enclosing. So we always have to judge, we have to be done, whether a hole is regarded as a Pesach or as a pirza. So the Gemara tells us that this hole in the wall between the mavi and the chutzner is serving a double function. It depends who's looking at it. When the chutzner is looking at it, it has the din of a Pesach. When the mavi is looking at this opening, it's a pirza because it's completely open. The entire wall is gone between the mavi and the chutzner. So therefore, the chutzner has no issue with erev chatzeres. He doesn't need to be mishatev himself, to combine, to merge residency between himself and the mavi, because he's a separate entity. It's like two chatzeres with a Pesach between them. They're not obliged to make an eruv one with the other. So the fact that there's no eruv here doesn't harm the chutzner in any way. He can continue carrying it, as opposed to the mavi, who's completely breached and open to that chutzner without a separating factor between them. There's no Pesach there. So therefore, as far as he's concerned, he's totally enmeshed with the chutzner, and he can't carry unless he makes an eruv chatzeres together with the residents of the chutzner. So that's the pshat in Rav. Chutzner muteres, mavi asur. So two halachas he's teaching us. On the one hand, the chutzner is muter, because he's considered to be a separate entity, as opposed to the mavi, where you cannot carry in the absence of erev chatzeres. Amalei Rabba bar Ula Ravi bar Abai. Rabbi, loy mishnah seinu hizu. What is the chiddush of Rav? Haven't we already learned this concept in a mishnah? Both concepts, that the chutzner should be muter and the mavi should be asur. Which mishnah? Chutzner ktana shenifas l'gdola. You have a small courtyard which was breached entirely to the larger courtyard next to it. So the entire wall of the chutzner ktana is gone. But the chutzner gdola is overlapping the ktana. So we have a similar situation here. As far as the chutzner ktana is concerned, he's missing a wall. That's a pirza, that's not a Pesach, when you're missing an entire wall. So he's completely exposed to the chutzner gdola. He's mixed in with the chutzner gdola, as opposed to the chutzner gdola with the ktana. As far as the chutzner gdola is concerned, he's not mixed up with the ktana. He takes a look at this breach. He says, well, this is my Pesach. This is an entranceway to the ktana. Because he has walls built on either side of that entranceway, of that meeting point between the ktana and the gdola. So the Mishnah tells us that a chutzner ktana shnifs gdola, gdola muteres. The chutzner gdola is perfectly muter to carry within it without an eruv with the ktana, because he's separated by a Pesach, uktana asura. But the chutzner ktana now is asur unless he makes an eruv with the gdola, because he's mixed in because this entry point, this point where the ktana and gdola join, is regarded as a Pesach, as an entranceway, as far as the gdola is concerned, but not as far as the ktana is concerned. So both concepts are already included in a Mishnah. What's Rav's chiddush? Amar lei, So Rav bar Abaye responded, there is a chiddush to Rav's halacha. Imi Hasam. If only that Mishnah, Havamina, perhaps I would think, that halacha, that a chatzar is mutter, that's only because it's a fully enclosed chatzar. There's no breach from the chatzar to Rishus Rabbim. The public is not passing through this chatzar. But in a case such as ours, where the public is accessing this, they're running through this chatzar, using it as an access route to get through to the other side, because we're speaking about a chatzar which was nifar to Rishus Rabbim. So the Rabbim, the pedestrians, are using this as a walkthrough from one Rishus Rabbim through the chatzar, through the mavi, all the way to the other Rishus Rabbim on the other side. So it's being used as an access route from one street to the other. Perhaps this would be different. Eima, afilu chatzar nami. Perhaps I would say that even the chatzar would be asr. It's considered Rishus Rabbim. It's part of the street. That's why Rav needs to teach us, no, that despite the fact that this chatzar has been breached to Rishus Rabbim, it doesn't negate its Rishus HaYochid status, because that pirza to Rishus Rabbim, being that it's no larger than 10 amis, is considered a Pesach, an entranceway to Rishus Rabbim, and therefore, although the Rabbim are using this as a walk-through, it still retains its Rishus HaYochid status. Let's take a look at Rashi inside, which is 6 lines from the bottom. Gufa Amar of Yirmiyah. So we went back to the halacha of Rav Yirmiyah, who told us that when the mavi is entering the chatzar, you cannot use the mavi. V'ukma, and we established the pshat in this halacha k'shel irvu, because it was in the absence of an erev. V'isura the mavi mishum the asri alei bnei achatzaru. The reason why you can't carry the mavi because the bnei achatzar, they are oiser the mavi due to the lack of erev between them. So the Gemara asked, weren't we already taught this halacha in a Mishnah? Lo Mishnah seni heter chatzar tanina. The fact that in such a situation, the chatzar would be mutter. We already learned that. Likewise, we learned that the mavi would be asr. Just as the case of the two chatzeris. Chatzar ktana shenifratza b'milua l'gdoila. This small sized courtyard, which has been fully breached, meaning the entire wall disappeared between himself and the gdoila. Gdoila muteras. Why? V'lo ya'asri b'nei ktani l'veid. And the residents of this small courtyard don't negate the gdoila. They don't make it asr. Why? Because from the Gdoila's perspective, this entrance, this meeting point between the Tana Gdoila is regarded as a Pesach. The Yeshla Shir Mekan Mekan, because there's some remaining built-up wall on both sides of that entry. It's like two chatzeris which are side by side with a doorway in between. They don't affect each other. The Gemara later will establish, describe that Tana isn't wider than 10 amos. Because if it would have been larger than 10 amos, we would not consider this breach as a Pesach, because we know that a hole, a gap larger than 10 amos wide, certainly cannot be considered a Pesach. Okay, but since it's 10 or less, then we regard it as a Pesach for the Gdoila, therefore the Gdoila remains mutter, because it is a separate entity from the Ktana. Uktana Asura. Why? As far as the Ktana is concerned, this breach is not a Pesach, a lapirza. It's a breach, because the entire wall of the Ktana is totally missing. It's considered to be the usage area of the Bnei Gdoila, because it got mixed up, it blended into the Gdoila. It was breached and got totally mixed in with the Gdoila. It became one entity. So as far as the Ktana is concerned, he's mixed in with the Gdoila, and therefore he needs to make an erev with all the residents together to allow carrying within it. So the kasha was, both halachas were already taught in the Mishnah. Number one, that the chatzar remains mutter. Number two, that the mavi remains also. Amar Leisi responded, there is a chiddush. Rav had the chatzar ashminan. He's coming to teach us that chatzar is mutter. Va'afagav the nifratza b'kois la'asheni. Although in our case, unlike the Mishnah with the chatzar, our case was speaking there, the chatzar was breached to Rishus Rabbim on the other wall. The Darsi Rabbim, it's used as a public thoroughfare. Mirshus Rabbim zu, Rishus Rabbim zu, from one street to the other. Derech chatzar mavi. So they go from one street to the chatzar, through the mavi to the other street. And he's teaching us that it's still mutter. And that we can't learn from the Mishnah. Dimil Hasam. If only from that Mishnah Havamina, I would say, Mishnah loy Darsi Rabbim. Because we're speaking with the Rabbim, do not use this as a walkthrough. Was speaking that the Chatzah G'dayla there only connected to the Tana. There was no other Pirza to Rishus Rabim in the G'dayla. So that's the Chiddush of Rav, despite the fact it's being used as a walkthrough from one street to the other, it still retains its Rishus HaYachid status. Continues the Gemara, but that as well was already taught in the Mishnah. 2 lines from the bottom in the Gemara, V'hanami Tanina. This as well was already taught in the Mishnah. Chatzah Sharabim Nichnasan Labezu. V'yoysin Labezu. If we have a Chatzah which is open on both sides, it has 2 entry points to Rishus Rabim, and the public uses it as a walkthrough. They go on from one side, they go out through the other. Rishus Rabim L'Tumah, Rishus Yachid L'Shabbos. When it comes to the halachos of Shabbos, it's considered to be a full-fledged Rishus Yachid, an enclosed area, despite the fact that this Chatzah features 2 entry points, and it's used as a walkthrough. When it comes to Rishus Rabim, when it comes to Tumah, that's a different concept. So we know that when there's an uncertainty, a suffix whether one became Tameh, and that suffix took place in Rishus Rabim, the halacha is suffix Tumah, but Rishus Rabim, it's Tor. Now the concept of Rishus Rabim, when it comes to Tumah, is unrelated to Shabbos. Shabbos is dependent on enclosure on mechitzos, as opposed to the halacha of Tumah, which is dependent on whether it's a public area. So if it's lacking privacy, it's called a Rishus Harabim. So this Chatzah, which is a publicly used area, when it comes to the halacha of Tumah, it's considered Rishus Harabim. That's unrelated to us. But when it comes to Shabbos, the Mishnah clearly says Rishus HaYachid. So we already taught this halacha in the Mishnah. When something is a walkthrough, it retains its Rishus HaYachid status. So what was Rav coming to teach us? Says the Imi Hasam, and only from that Mishnah Havamina, I would say, Hani Mili, that's only Zeh Shloi Keneged Zeh. We're speaking a case where both openings to Rishus Rabim were not directly opposite each other. In which case the access route is not such a convenient access route. You're going in from one side of the Chatzar, you're coming out of the other. It's not directly opposite each other. It's not considered perhaps Rishus Rabim because it's not a convenient direct route. Perhaps that is the case that the Mishnah they are speaking about. Perhaps when both entry points are directly facing each other, perhaps that loses its Rishus HaYachid status. It's considered like a street. So that is what Rab's coming to teach us. No, even when both entry points are directly opposite each other, the Chatzar remains a Chatzar and remains a Yachid, and one can carry through it. Says the Gemara, but that's only if you assume that Rav was speaking about such a case, that the Chatzar had two entry points which were directly opposite each other. Says the Gemara, L'Rabba de Amar Zeh Keneged Zeh Asur. However, according to Rabbah, who taught us earlier that Rav evidently is not speaking about such a case, because when Rav tells us that the Mavi which is entering a Chatzah, which has been breached to Rishus Rabim, the Mavi is called a Mavi Sasam, and one can go ahead and carry in the Chatzar. So when Rav tells us the Mavi is a Mavi Sasam, that's only because the breach that occurred in the wall of the Chatzar opposite that Mavi was speaking about specifically where that Pirza was not directly facing the Mavi. Zeh Keneged Zeh Asur. If it would be opposite the Mavi would be considered Mavi Mefulish. So apparently Rav was not speaking about that, because Rav says it's Mavi Sasam. The Rav of my Mukila. If so, how do we interpret Rav, who tells us that the Mavi entering this Chatzar is a Mavi Sasam? Apparently, the both entry points of the Chatzar were not directly facing each other. And that's why the Mavi is called a Mavi Sasam, because we don't regard this alleyway as though it's heading out to Rishus Rabim, as we mentioned earlier in Daf Chesam and Aleph. Now, if that's the case, that Rav is speaking where the both entry points of the Chatzar are not directly opposite each other, Tarti Lamali, then why do we need this repetition? Meaning, the whole point here was that from the Mishnah, we would think perhaps the Chatzar only retains its Rishus HaYachid status because both entry points to the Chatzar are not directly facing each other. Rav is coming to teach us, even though they're facing each other, it's still Rishus HaYachid. But Rav is not speaking about such a case. Rav himself was only speaking where the Chatzar was open with 2 entranceways that are not facing each other. If that's the case, then he's merely repeating the halacha in the Mishnah. Says the Gemara, there's still a chiddush from Rav. If only from that Mishnah, I would say, perhaps, Hanimi Lizrik. Yes, this chatzar is considered Rosh Hashanah despite the fact that it's being used as a walkthrough for the rabbim, which are entering one side, going out the other. Perhaps that's a Rosh Hashanah for Minat Torah. Hanimil Lizrik. We consider it to be Minat Torah Rosh Hashanah. For instance, if one is standing outside and throws an object into this chatzar, he is chayev due to the fact that he threw from Shesram Shayachet. But perhaps midrabanan, one would not be allowed to carry within this chatzar. Perhaps one cannot carry throughout this chatzar midrabanan. Perhaps we would consider it like a Carmelis, since it's a publicly used area. Kamash malon. That's why Rav comes to teach us. No, one can use this chatzar without any hesitation. Even midrabanan, one can carry through it, since it's enclosed. There's no pirza here. So despite the fact that there are two entry points, and the rabbim are using it as a walkthrough, it still retains its Rosh Hashanah status, even to allow til to midrabanan. So in summary, we learned that a chatzar who features two entry points, where the rabbim are actually making use of this chatzar, one can carry in this chatzar, even if it's darsi b'rabbim, and even if the entry points are directly facing each other, which makes it a very convenient walkthrough. And the Gemara concluded, one can carry through this chatzar even midrabanan. Continues the Gemara. Itma we learned mavoy ha'asri kenedel. So nadal is this centipede. So this low-lying creature that has a long body, and that there are legs which branch off to the side. So we have a mavi which is configured in such a manner. We have a main alleyway, a main mavi, and we have small alleyways branching off to the side. Now the main alleyway is a mavi sasam, meaning it begins at the Rosh Hashanah, but then it has three mechitzes. It's not heading to another Rosh Hashanah directly. However, these small alleyways, which are branching off the side of this main alleyway, they are heading to Rosh Hashanah. This is a typical mavi akum, a bent mavi. Mavi asakinel. Amar Abaye, how are you meant to adapt this mavi and allow carrying within it? So he goes ahead and constructs a physical formation of a doorway to Pesach at the entry point of the main alleyway, where it meets Rosh Hashanah. And now the other small alleyways, mishtaru, they become permitted by simply placing a lecha u'kaira, where they meet Rosh Hashanah. But there's nothing required anywhere throughout the mavi, not at the bends, nowhere else. Just it's Rosh Pesach at the opening of the large mavi, and the lechi u'kaira at the entrance point to Rosh Hashanah of these small alleyways. Amalei Rav responded to Abaye. Apparently, you are treating this mavi kanada like a mavi sasam, despite the fact that it begins and leads into Shesravim. Keman kishmur the amatoris sasam. You're regarding it as a mavi sasam, and therefore you don't require anything at the bend. Lomali tzuras haPesach. So why do you require tzuras haPesach at all? According to Shmuel, these mavos are considered to be fully enclosed mavos. Standard mavi sasam. All you need is a lecha v'koira. Why did you require them to place a tzuras haPesach at the entry point of the large mavi? Void, another kasha. How can you treat this as a mavi sasam? Hahu mavi akum davar ben Arda. There was this mavi akum in Arda, which we had learned earlier on Daf Vav. V'chosh l'derav, and they took Rav's shita into consideration. So Tais explains, despite the fact that Nardo was actually the place of Shmuel's residence, they reckoned with Rav's shita. Apparently, even the place of Shmuel's residence, Rav's shita has some credence and credibility. We meant to reckon with it and treat it like a mavi mafulish. So Rava disagrees with Abaye. Elam Rava, this is how we meant to proceed. Rava says, yes, indeed, we treat this like a mavi akum, like a mavi mafulish. And therefore, we need many tzuras haPesach. Oisa tzuras haPesach lekulu l'haigisa. He places many tzuras haPesach, tzuros haPesach, at the bends, meaning where the small alleyways branch off from the large alleyway. So at that crack, at that bend in the L, at that right angle, you place a tzuras haPesach, which will enclose the mavi, will make it like a mavi sasam. And now we have a mavi sasam, fine. You add your standard lecha v'kaira at the other end of the moed. On the other side, mishru b'lecha v'koira, they will become mutter by placing lecha v'koira. So Rava disagrees with Abai. He says, treat it like a mavim foolish, in accordance with Shita's Rav. Place a tzuras HaPesach in the middle of the mavim, in order to break up the small mavim from the big mavim, to make it like a mechitza, to turn each individual mavim, each individual alleyway like a mavim sasam, like it's enclosed from three sides, and then treat it like a mavim sasam, where a standard lecha v'koira would suffice at the entry point to Shus Rabbah. Continues the Gemara. Amar Rav Kahana bar Tachlifa, Mishmei, in the name of the Rav Kahana bar Menumi, Mishmei, in the name of the Rav Kahana bar Malchayoy, Mishmei, in the name the Rav Kahana who was Rabbi, the teacher of the Rav, who was the Rebbe of Rav. But Amrilah, some have a different version, that Rav Kahana bar Malachav himself, Hainu himself was actually Rav Kahana, Rabbi the Rav. He was the Rav Kahana who was the Rebbe of Rav. Okay, so which halacha did they teach us? As follows: Mavi shetzidei echad aruch, v'tzidei echad katzer. You have an alleyway where one of the two walls extends past the other wall into Shus Rabbah. So one wall is longer than the other. Where do you place the koira? So it depends how much the wall extends into Shus Rabbah past the other wall. Pachas me'arba amis, if it merely extends less than 4 amis, no problem. He takes the koira, he takes that crossbeam and places it diagonally. He puts it at the end of the long wall and stretches it over, places it on the top of the short wall, and covers the whole area within it, which is mutter. Arba amis, but if this area is longer than 4 amis, which is already a significant area, the shear of a mavoi. So if the longer wall extends 4 amas past the shorter wall, we can allow the koira to be placed diagonally. In this case, he places the koira opposite the short wall. So he places it at the top of the end of the short wall and brings it over to the large wall and does not allow carrying in this space alongside the wall which extends to Shus Rabbah. So that's the first sheet. Rava Amar, no. In either case, when the wall extends past the other, he can only place the koira opposite the small wall, the short wall. We cannot place a koira diagonally. Says Rava, I'll explain. I'll explain my reasoning. I'll explain their reasoning. What is my reason? Koira tamamai. How does a koira work? Mishum heker. It makes that indication, that separateness between the Mav and Shus Rabbah. When placing a koira diagonally, it doesn't provide recognition. It's not a proper indicator. Rashi will explain for us that if you're going to place the koira at a slant and allow carrying all throughout that area, a person walking by will see people carrying along the long wall, which is extending past the short wall. It will appear like they're carrying a Shus Rabbah. So there is no proper indication here that it's a mavi. Therefore, I don't allow carrying alongside the long wall altogether. So that's my reason. Koira works as a hecker. I'll explain their reasoning as well. They hold koira mishum mai mishum mechitza. The koira, although it's demonstrating the separation between the mavi and Shus Rabbah, but it's based on the guidelines of mechitza. The Chacham established that kind of koira based on certain guidelines. It's meant to conform to the halachas of mechitza. It's viewed like a partition, like a wall that was erected. Now, a wall, you can build a wall in any shape, or form, or direction, or angle that you wish. Or by lachsanam, you have a mechitza. So even diagonally is considered mechitza. Therefore, they hold that you can place the koira at an angle. It's as though you built a wall, and that allows carrying anywhere within it. Amar Rav Kahana, since this is a halacha which was stated by all these individuals with the name Kohen, I too, who have a name Kahana, will add my perspective. This that you say that you can place the koira diagonally, this is only said provided that the entire length of that slant, of that angle, is no more than 10 amis. But if this alachson totals more than 10 ames, all agree that you cannot do that. You must place the koira opposite the short wall in order to lessen the width of the opening to the mavi. Meaning he's saying as follows: even though the entry point to the mavi is merely, let's say, 10 ames in width, which is fine, as long as it's not greater than 10 ames, it's called a pesach. But when you place something at an angle, so you're beginning at the short wall, and you're putting it at an angle to the long wall, the width, the total length of this koira will total more than 10 ames. So all of the actual width of the entry point to the mavi is merely 9 or 10, which is fine. But this koira is what forms the entry point to the mavi. It's creating that pesach, right? The whole point of koira is that it should create that separation, create that entry point. So if the koira itself is longer than 10 ames, you've created a pesach, which is wider than 10 ames, which is a pirza, and it's useless. Therefore, he says you must be careful that it doesn't total more than 10 ames. Let's take a look at Rashi inside, 14 lines from the bottom. It says Rashi, tzidei echad aruch, you have a wall which is actually long, v'nimshach koisel shesarabim, which extends into shesarabim yoisem koisel hasheni kazeh, longer than the other side. As the diagram in Rashi, you have the mavi, and the right side of the mavi extends past the left side. So it depends. In pachas me'arba ames, oidiv zel chaveroi, if this extension is less than 4 ames, maniach koira b'alachsoin, he places the koira at a slant, v'yishtamish kam barucha v'kam b'ktzora, and he uses this space alongside each wall. So you can use on the longer wall, you can use more area than the shorter wall. Arba ames, but if this extension is 4 ames or more, then he cannot place the koira in such a manner. Al roish koisel ha'orach, he can't place it atop the extended wall. Ela koines lefnim miroisha, he must bring the koira in. Keneged roish koisel ha'kotzer manicha, he must place it opposite the shorter wall. So that's the first sheet in the Gemara, depending how long the wall is. That determines the placement of the koira. Rava, however, says no, I don't allow placing a koira at an angle. Why? Because I hold the koira is meant to indicate, meant to provide heker, or ba'alachshon la'avei akira. You're defeating the purpose if you're placing it at an angle. Why? Sheroy b'nei mavi. So the onlooker sees that the residents of the mavi, nimshachin, u'nishtamishim shesarabim, they're going out and carrying in the shesarabim, chutz mikineged koisel ha'kotzer, beyond the shorter wall. Omer, this fellow will say, mutlo shtamish shesarabim. What is allowed to carry shesarabim? He won't realize that it's within the mavi. Because that extra space doesn't appear. It doesn't appear like it's part of the mavi. So you're defeating the purpose. The whole koira is meant to show separateness. It's going to confuse people. Now the Gemara concluded that even if you're allowed to place the koira at an angle, that's only provided that the width of that new entranceway that you're forming, meaning the total length of that koira, doesn't total more than 10 ames. It's very narrow. Rashi means is that the entry point to the mavi is very narrow. So even if you place this koira at this angle, it won't total more than 10 ames. But if it totals more than 10 ames, you have a problem. This results in the entry point to the mavi being greater than 10 ames. Says Rashi, why? What do you mean? The entry point to the mavi is less than 10 ames. Just because the koira is longer? Why does that harm the mavi? Says Rashi, the punchline is Sharei Kol Tachas HaKoira Pesach. Because beneath the koira is called a Pesach. The koira is fashioning the entryway to the mavi. So when you place it diagonally, you're forming a diagonal entryway. If it's greater than 10 ames, it's a pirza. And it does not constitute a Pesach. So in summary, we learned about a mavi. One side is longer than the other. So what do you do? So if the extension is less than 4 amas, Rav Kana says, you can place the koira on a slant. You can place it keneged the aruch. Rava says, no, you can never place it crooked. It has to be opposite the short wall. Place the koira straight in a way which will provide proper heker. All agree that if the extension is 4 amas or more, which is a significant shear, you cannot place the koira that far out. You must place it opposite the short wall. The Gemara concludes that if this alachson totals more than 10 amos, so the kaira placed in a slant is reaching more than 10 amos, then all agree you cannot use this entry point. You must shorten that entry point to 10 amos or less. Continues the Gemara. What about a standard kaira lying alongside the entranceway to a mavi? Can one carry beneath that kaira or not? So they asked the following question. Can one carry beneath the kaira? Is the space below the kaira included in the heter of the kaira or not? We have a machlekes. Rabbi Chira, Rabbi Yechon Amru, mutar l'shtamash tachas hakaira. Shmuel, Rabbi Shimba, Rabbi Shimba Lachash Amru, also l'shtamash tachas hakaira. So some say you can, some say you cannot use the space underneath the kaira. Explains the Gemara, what is the point of the machlekes? Lema shall we say? That this is the point of the machlekes. The Mar Savar, kaira mishum heker. The shita that says that one can carry beneath the kaira, he holds that the kaira is functioning as an indicator of separateness between the mavi and shesarabim. Therefore, the heker is activated at the outer surface of that kaira. So one sees that kaira from the outside. He sees that this is a different entity. And therefore, the heter of the kaira begins at the outer portion of the kaira, and beneath the kaira is included in the heter. Umar Sava kaira shemachitza. The other shita that does not allow carrying underneath the kaira says, you know how a kaira works? Certainly it's providing heker to show separateness, but it's based on the concept of mechitza. We view the kaira as though it's descending, it's closing off the entry point to the mavi. Therefore, he holds that the mechitza only works from the inner point, inner surface of that kaira. We view the chudi hapnimi, the inside corner facing downward of that kaira, as though it's descending down and closing off the area. Therefore, beneath the kaira is not included in the heter. Says Gemara, you don't need to say that this is the point of the machlekes. The kuliyam kol mishum heker. All agree perhaps that the kaira works as a heker. So what is the machlekes? The point of the machlekes is as follows: the mar sabei kerem legav. A shita that says that one cannot carry beneath the kaira holds that the heker is directed primarily at the inhabitants of the mavi who are exiting the mavi, and they see this kaira before them. That creates that heker, that separation. So since it's the interior surface of the kaira which is functioning as the heker, so only from that point inward can one carry, but not beneath the kaira itself. Umar savei kerem levar. The other shita holds that the heker is directed primarily at the bnei shesarabim who are entering the mavi. So it's the outer surface of the kaira which is providing heker, and therefore anything inward, including the area beneath the kaira, is included in the heter. Same another approach. The kuli alma all agree kaira mishum mechitza, that a kaira works with the concept of mechitza. It's viewed as though it's a wall built alongside the entry to the mavi. And the point of machlekes is as follows: the marsav are chudei pnimi yord v'soisim. The shita that says that one cannot carry under the kaira, he holds that the inner point of the kaira, which is facing downward, is yord v'soisim, viewed as though it's descending down and making a mechitza. So the mechitza is activated at the interior surface of the kaira. Because the point of the mechitza is to enclose an area. Anything within the enclosure is considered to be enclosed. So inside the kaira is considered to be contained by the kaira, and therefore one can only carry up until the kaira. Umar Sabar, however, the other sheet that says one can carry beneath the kaira, he says, sure, the kaira works as a mechitza, but which surface of the kaira is viewed as though it's descending down? The outer corner of the kaira, which is facing down, is viewed as though it's descending and closing off the area. Apparently he holds that you need to shut out the shesarabim. The point is not so much to create an enclosure to the mavi, to the kaira, rather to block out the shesarabim. So which surface of the kaira is accomplishing that? It's the outer surface of the kaira, which is on the shesarabim side. So once you detach the shesarabim from the mavi, you've created a proper mavi. And therefore, anything within that point is included in the heter of the kaira, including beneath the kaira. Now, what about alongside a lechi? All will agree. Alongside a lechi, one cannot carry. So lechi is the post placed alongside the entryway to the mavi instead of the kaira. In that case, all agree one cannot carry alongside the lechi. This explains because in contrast to a kaira, which is something relatively wide, it's a tefach wide, which is something noticeable, the lechi can even be a thin, flimsy piece of wood, which is not so noticeable, and therefore we cannot allow carrying alongside it. Perhaps it's going to create confusion. If you carry there, this will lead to one carrying Shesarab. Continues the Gemara. What about the following case? Not shtei yisedos b'shnei koisli mavi machutz. So you have the two walls of the mavi heading to Shesarabim. Instead of placing the koira over the entryway to the mavi, he affixed two poles sticking out, extending the Shesarabim. So one on this side and one on this side, to be used as a support for the koira. And he placed the koira alongside the entranceway, but instead of above it, he placed it alongside the entranceway on these sticks. Not shtei yisedos b'shnei koisli mavi machutz. So he fixed these two poles, extending from the two walls of the mavi, extending outward, and he placed the koira above them. So the koira is outside of the mavi, but it is flush, it is touching the mavi. But instead of over the entryway, it's beside the entryway. What is the halacha? Can one use the koira in this manner or not? So Rav Chizah responded something interesting. We had a machlokes earlier, can one use the space beneath the koira? Says Rav Chizah, it's going to depend on that. According to the Shita, that one can use the space beneath the koira, because apparently it's the outer surface of the koira which is providing that mechitza, for instance. So anything within that point is considered part of the heter, was covered by the koira. So since it's the outer surface of the koira which is being activated, that outer surface is far removed from the mavi. It's outer Shesarabim. It doesn't relate to the mavi. Aser. So according to that shita, this mavi this koira does not function as a koira which will allow carrying the mavi, because it's not connected to the mavi. And the point of a koira is to create that entryway, that Pesach, to be part of the Pesach. But if it's out in Shesarabim, it doesn't relate to the mavi. But conversely, l'divrei ha'oser mutar, according to the shita, that you cannot carry beneath that koira. Apparently, it's because the inner surface of that koira is providing coverage. That inner surface is flush against the mavi, so it relates to the mavi and can provide coverage. L'divrei ha'oser mutar. Rav Amar, no. L'divrei ha'oser nami aser. Even according to this shita, it's aser to carry the mavi. Why? Be'inan koira al gabi mavi v'leka. The koira is required to be on the mavi, over the entryway of the mavi. But if it's beside the mavi, that's not creating that configuration of Pesach, and therefore it doesn't serve any function. It does not allow carrying within the mavi. So in summary, we discussed carrying beneath the koira. One shita says muta, one shita says asa. We have three approaches. Number one, the question is whether koira is providing heker, in which case even beneath the koira is included in that, or it's providing mechitza, in which case beneath the koira is not included. The next approach was all agree that it's heker. The question is the heker begin outside, in which case the koira is included, or does the heker begin inside, in which case beneath the koira is not included? The third approach was all agree that a koira works as a mechitza. Is it the inner portion of the koira which is providing coverage, in which case the koira is not included, or is the outer portion, in which case the koira is included? When the koira is sitting on top of these poles, Rav Chizah says it depends on those shitas. The shita that allows carrying beneath the koira, because the outer portion is being activated, so it's too far from the mavi. It doesn't function for the mavi. The shita that does not allow carrying beneath the koira, because it's the inner surface of the koira which is being activated, that's close enough to the mavi, and therefore it allows carrying the mavi. Rabbi says according to all shitas, it's asr because it's not above the entry point. All agree that alongside the lechi, one may not carry. Okay, time for a brief review of today's daf. The Gemara began by telling us that when something belongs to a yachid, there's a concern about changing, about developments. For instance, the ruchava that belongs to a yachid, he might build it up. The ashpa, he might remove the ashpa. The Gemara tells us as well that a yam might kick up pebbles and earth, and a gate level off that wall, remove that mechitza. We learned that a chatzar is mutar b'tiltil even when it's used as a thoroughfare. The rabbim are entering one side, exiting the other, even if those entry points are opposite each other. And one can carry in this chatzar, even with Rabbanan. When we have a mavi which is uneven, one side is extending past the other. When it's less than dalad amis, according to Rav Kahana, you place the koira ba'alachsein, opposite the long one. According to Rava, it's always opposite the short one. If the extension is dalad amis, all agree, you cannot use that extension. The Gemara tells us, if the total length of that koira placed diagonally is more than 10 amis, you cannot use that entry point because it's considered a pirza. We discussed using the space beneath the koira alongside the lechayayim and in case of a koira, which is placed on supports alongside the Magen.